Ottawa hasn't been this tense in years. What started as an ordinary morning interview on CBC suddenly turned into a political earthquake that no one saw coming. In less than 10 minutes, Chris Dontram, a veteran Conservative MP from Nova Scotia, detonated a truth bomb that rattled every corner of Parliament Hill. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't throw insults. He simply spoke with the calm frustration of a man who'd finally had enough. And his words hit harder than any headline. The party I joined no longer exists. Moments later, he confirmed what insiders had whispered for months. 3, maybe 4 more Conservative MPs are considering crossing the floor to join Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberal government. That number might seem small, but politically, it's everything. If those defections happen, Carney's minority would become a majority overnight, rewriting Canada's political map and ending the Conservative dream of regaining power. The story wasn't about a single defection. It was about the unraveling of a movement and the rise of a leader who doesn't need to shout to command a room. This is Northern Pulse, and today, we're diving deep into the moment that exposed Pierre Poilievre's biggest weakness and revealed why Mark Carney's quiet, steady strategy is slowly cornering him on every front. Because while Poilievre was busy chasing applause, Carney was building alliances. And when the dust settled, one of them was left shouting into an empty room. Behind the polished press conferences and perfectly rehearsed talking points, the Conservative caucus has been imploding. Dontram described it best. Angry, chaotic, directionless. Inside Parliament, frustration has been boiling for months. Staffers talk about meetings that feel more like shouting matches than strategy sessions. Long-time MPs feel ignored, sidelined by a leadership team that rewards loyalty over logic. One aide even described it as a frat house masquerading as a political party. This is the environment Chris Dontram walked away from. For him, it wasn't betrayal. It was survival. He had spent 2 decades serving as a provincial and federal Conservative, only to watch his party drift into rage politics. Every policy discussion turned into a performance. Every disagreement turned into a loyalty test. According to insiders, multiple MPs had already begun private conversations with Liberal and independent colleagues, testing the waters, seeking an escape route. But Dontram's defection was the signal they'd been waiting for. Proof that it was possible to leave and still have a future. And that's where Carney's calm demeanor became his biggest weapon. While Poilievre ruled with sound bites, Carney ruled with strategy. One side shouted about enemies, the other quietly built bridges. For many Conservatives, the choice suddenly seemed obvious. But the spark that set this entire fire ablaze wasn't political maneuvering. It was one simple conversation that changed everything. Mark Carney didn't twist arms. He didn't beg for loyalty. He simply waited for the cracks to widen. When Dontram sat down for a private conversation with Carney, sources say it was less a recruitment and more a reflection. Carney listened more than he spoke. He offered no promises, no positions, only one question. What kind of politics do you want to leave behind? For a man like Dontram, who'd grown weary of shouting matches and performative outrage, that question hit hard. Carney understood something Poilievre didn't. People don't defect because of policy. They defect because of leadership. By the time Dontram left that meeting, his decision was sealed. Not because Carney persuaded him, but because Poilievre's chaos had pushed him there. This wasn't the first time Carney played the long game. For months he had been quietly reshaping Ottawa's balance of power, reaching across ideological lines, restoring discipline, and proving that calm isn't weakness, it's confidence. The result? Moderates, centrists, even frustrated conservatives began to see Carney not as an opponent, but as an anchor, a leader capable of steering through global storms without losing his cool. And as Dontram's announcement spread, Carney didn't say a word. No press release, no comment, just silence. But that silence spoke volumes. Because in Canadian politics, confidence isn't about how loud you are. It's about how little you need to say. The moment hit live television like a lightning strike. Dontram sat across from the CBC host, composed and steady, the kind of politician you could tell wasn't acting. When asked why he'd switched sides, he didn't flinch. Because it was better to be part of a government building the country, he said, than a party tearing itself apart. Viewers froze. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. There was no bitterness, just exhaustion. No attack, just truth. Within minutes, the clip went viral. Collapse from within trended nationwide. Political analysts called it the most damaging public defection since Belinda Stronach crossed the floor in 2005. But this one hit harder, because the cracks had been visible for months and now they were breaking open. Poilievre's office scrambled to respond, dismissing Dontram as a turncoat. But the damage was already done. Canadians saw not betrayal but liberation. In that single interview, Dontram transformed from backbencher to bellwether, the first domino in a chain reaction that would redefine the Conservative Party's future. And for Mark Carney, it was validation. His calm, quiet governance wasn't boring. It was winning. Because while Poilievre weaponized outrage, Carney turned discipline into strategy. The country had just witnessed the political equivalent of a chess player announcing checkmate, not with noise but with poise. What came next was pure chaos. Within hours of Dontram's announcement, Conservative headquarters descended into panic. Senior figures stormed into his office, shouting accusations and calling him a snake. One aide described it as a complete meltdown, doors slamming, tempers exploding. To outsiders, it looked like anger. To insiders, it looked like fear. That outburst confirmed what many already suspected. Poilievre's leadership wasn't built on strength. It was built on control. And now, that control was slipping. Leaks began pouring out. Internal messages warning MPs not to engage with Carney's team. Veiled threats about career consequences for anyone disloyal. But intimidation only deepened the divide. The more Poilievre tried to tighten his grip, the more MPs began to question what they were fighting for. Meanwhile, Carney stayed silent. His team made no statements, no attacks. Instead, they quietly prepared for what everyone knew was coming: more defections. In politics, panic is contagious, and by the end of that week, it had spread across the Conservative benches. One reporter summed it up perfectly. Carney speaks like a leader. Poilievre reacts like a man cornered. And in that one sentence, the story shifted from rebellion to reckoning. 3 or 4 MPs. That's all it takes to change everything. Behind closed doors, conversations intensified. Moderate conservatives, business-friendly voices, even rural representatives began weighing their options. Some didn't plan to switch immediately. They just wanted an exit plan in case things got worse. But everyone knew what it meant. If even a handful of them crossed the floor, Mark Carney would gain a working majority. Suddenly, his budgets would pass without drama. Confidence votes would become formalities. And for the first time since taking office, Carney would have complete control over the direction of Canada's economy, energy, and foreign policy. The international reaction was swift. Markets steadied. Allies praised Canada's return to stability. European diplomats quietly admitted they preferred Carney's predictability to Poilievre's populist firestorms. This wasn't just about politics. It was about credibility. The world saw a leader managing crises with composure, while his rival struggled to manage his own team. As one columnist wrote, Poilievre built his empire on outrage. Carney built his on outcomes. Guess which one the world respects? And that's when the real fear set in. Not that Carney would win the next election, but that Poilievre's party might not survive to fight it. Chris Dontram's most devastating revelation wasn't about caucus chaos or intimidation. It was what he heard from voters. At the doorstep, people didn't say they opposed conservative policies. They said they couldn't stand Pierre Poilievre. Think about that. The problem wasn't ideology. It was personality. After years of branding himself as a fighter for the people, Poilievre had become a symbol of division. His rallies drew cheers, but not confidence. His speeches fired up loyalists but alienated moderates. In contrast, Carney's calm tone, often mocked as boring by critics, began to look presidential. He spoke less, but said more. And while Poilievre doubled down on slogans, Carney quietly rolled out initiatives. New trade deals, environmental reforms, tech partnerships, and cross-border diplomacy that impressed even his skeptics. The contrast couldn't be clearer. One man built headlines, the other built history. And as Dontram's story spread, Canadians started asking themselves a simple question: who actually looks like a prime minister? For many, the answer was no longer Pierre Poilievre. Every generation witnesses a moment when power quietly changes hands, not through elections or revolutions, but through exhaustion. Canada may have just reached that point. The Conservative Party's crisis isn't just internal, it's generational. The anger-driven populism that once energized crowds is now wearing thin. Canadians are tired of slogans, tired of shouting, tired of politics that feels like a never-ending fight. And in that fatigue, Mark Carney has found his opening. Carney's strength has always been subtle. He doesn't chase cameras or punchlines. Instead, he lets results speak for him. Trade deals that stabilize industries, economic strategies that restore confidence, and diplomacy that rebuilds trust with allies who'd long stopped returning Ottawa's calls. In a time of chaos, competence suddenly feels radical. His approach doesn't just challenge the Conservative Party, it redefines what leadership means in the modern age. Meanwhile, Pierre Poilievre's message, once fiery and fresh, now feels repetitive, trapped in the same loop of outrage that once made him famous. The very aggression that built his base has become his cage. As moderates flee and defections multiply, it's clear that his movement isn't expanding, it's collapsing inward. Canadians are witnessing the slow birth of a new political order, one that values stability over spectacle, collaboration over confrontation. Carney isn't shouting to be heard. He's listening, calculating, and quietly reshaping the center of Canadian politics around reason and resilience. This isn't just about who wins the next election. It's about who defines Canada's next decade. And if the current trajectory holds, The answer may no longer be the man with the loudest voice, but the one with the steadiest hand. This is the calm before a permanent shift, and Carney is already standing at its center. What began as a single defection has evolved into something far greater, a moment of reckoning for Canadian politics. Chris Dontram's quiet decision to cross the floor didn't just shake Pierre Poilievre's leadership, it revealed how fragile his empire truly was. For years, Poilievre built his image on fury, on the idea that anger could fuel a movement. But anger doesn't build, it burns. And now, those flames are consuming his own party from the inside out. Mark Carney, on the other hand, has proven that leadership doesn't need to roar. His calm, deliberate approach, mocked by critics as too safe, is exactly what's winning people over. While others fight for headlines, he's earning trust. While rivals pick enemies, he's building alliances. That quiet discipline has become Canada's new definition of power. If even a few more MPs follow Dontram's lead, Carney's government won't just survive, it will solidify. The Liberal minority will transform into a majority, giving Carney full control to shape policy, trade, and Canada's global identity. And that means the next chapter of Canada's story may no longer be written in outrage, but in order. For Poilievre, this isn't just a political loss, it's a warning. You can't build a nation on division forever. Eventually, people crave direction. They want results, not rants. And for Carney, this is the vindication of patience. Proof that calm isn't weakness and silence isn't surrender. Canada is turning a page. The shouting is fading. The strategy is speaking. This is Northern Pulse, where we cut through the noise and follow the heartbeat of a nation in transition, one that's choosing leadership over loudness and substance over show. Because in politics, the quiet ones always win in the end.